FanDuel has released the odds to win conferences. And I'm looking at the Big Ten right now. And I was thinking about my confidence meter. I was telling Jesse, how should we go about this? I don't want to just randomly say one thing per team. I want to talk about my confidence that Team X or Team Y or Team Z could win this conference. So with the Big Ten, Ohio State, yes, I have no doubt about that. Oregon, I have no doubt about that. I don't want to be disrespectful to Ryan Day and Dan Lanning. I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time talking about him on here. Ohio State's biggest hurdle, yes, they have to replace some production, but the schedule is the thing first and foremost that a lot of people are going to talk about with Ohio State, because I think you know as well as I do that if Bradley put this graphic up here and it was Penn State's schedule that Ohio State was playing, they'd be a slam dunk favorite to do this, that, and the other. So Ohio State, I got no doubt they can win the conference. I've got them at a 10 on the confidence scale. Likewise with Oregon. You can talk all you want to with Ohio State about replacing this or that, or Oregon. Well, what are they going to do about this offensive line? Everybody's got questions. There is no yeah, but when it comes to questions in spring ball because everyone's got them. So until you show me this perfect team out there, I am not knocking your potential ability to win the Big Ten just because you've got to replace fill in the blank on the O-line. Because I know what you have outside of that. I know you got DeCorian Moore coming back. I know you got Evan Stewart coming back. I know who's throwing him the ball if everyone's healthy up there. Like, I got so few questions about Oregon relative to the rest of the Big Ten. So I've got them at a 10 as well. So Ohio State and Oregon, 10 out of 10 on my confidence level that they can win the Big Ten. This is not a prediction they will. It's just confidence rating that they can. All right, now with Indiana, there were two very, very opposed schools of thought in my mind. There was the one school that remembers how wrong I was, how frequently I was wrong about Indiana last year. And that school of thought is, no, just pick them to win every game. Salvage yourself. Save yourself. And then there's the other school of thought that says, nope, wipe the slate clean. Whatever happened in 2025 is a distant memory. It's not. But whatever happened back then is a distant memory. You've got to judge this team on the surface for who they are and what they could be. And we compromised. And I think I put Indiana at a 9 on the confidence scale that they could win the Big Ten. Couple of questions that I have. Small questions in the grand scheme of things. Well, I don't know if this is a small question. So Fernando Mendoza goes off to the NFL. Josh Hoover comes in. And they went and they identified him pretty quickly. Quarterback at TCU. They plucked him. They brought him to Bloomington. I'm sure he'll do fine. All right, is he going to do as good as Fernando Mendoza did? Both in terms of the stat sheet and the leadership piece. Is it just going to be this one-for-one plug and replace? Seldom does it work that way. Now, sometimes the guy who comes in is better than the guy who left. In this case, it's going to be tough to be better than the Heisman Trophy winner, number 1 overall draft pick, quarterback position. However, that's not necessarily the way football works. It doesn't always have to be a perfect one-for-one trade-off. So let's say Josh Hoover comes in, cuts down on his interception rate, which they're going to count on him to do, cuts down on that, but he's like, 85% of the player that Fernando Mendoza was. Well, then you just got to get a little bit more elsewhere. So then I look at the wide receiver position, and I think about Cooper and Surratt being gone, and, we got Becker still there, but also we bring in Nick Marsh. Is that an equal trade-off? Do I get a little bit more, a little bit less? I just look around the totality of this roster, and I wonder if this transfer class patches all the holes. Now, the follow-up to that, if we were debating, is you could say, hey, Indiana wasn't winning by just scraping by last year. Like, they dominated a lot of the competition. So what if, in totality, this team is only 90% of what it was? Is that not still good enough to win the Big Ten? Yeah, it would be. That's why I put them at a 9 in my confidence that they can win it. And also, we've never had to talk about this with Indiana. And I hesitate talking about it now, but the whole concept of the consequences of success, which is a phrase that we use on this show a lot, that whole batch of issues that only winners ever discover that you have to deal with. Who knows, man? Maybe Indiana's magic and they're just immune to all that. But because this is future-facing, I still have to factor that into the equation. So I'm going to put a 9 on Indiana. All right, then we get down to the next tier. So Penn State. Everybody's going to talk about Penn State's schedule. Me too, because the schedule is the most workable out of any of the contending teams in the Big Ten. If you want to know what conference expansion has done to this sport, Look no further than Penn State and Ohio State having the same over-under win total at FanDuel of 9.5. These are not apples-to-apples quality of teams, but because Ohio State plays such a disproportionately tougher schedule than Penn State, FanDuel said 9.5. Slap the sticker on both of them, roll it off the assembly line. Well, because of that schedule, I got to kind of artificially enhance Penn State's confidence rating here a little bit. So I put them all the way up at an 8 that they can win the Big Ten. A lot of it's scheduling based. Also, let's look beyond the schedule, because schedulers don't play games. Teams do. The team that they're going to put on the field this fall, this roster, they did lose some guys. They kept kind of a core base of the Penn State roster. They imported the top 2 layers of the Iowa State roster, and that also comes with a quarterback offensive coordinator combo. So you've got one of those situations. This is kind of happening more and more in college football of head coach comes in, but he also sort of brings his guys with him. And that includes, in this case, a quarterback, offensive coordinator. So no one's having to learn new systems at the quarterback position, at least. And also, they could be a downhill momentum candidate. Bradley, throw their schedule back up for a second. So if you're listening on podcast, there's out of conference schedule is terrible. Quick 5-second timeout. Check and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It keeps it free. We love you. All right, back to the show. And then their first 2 conference opponents are Wisconsin and Northwestern. So they don't play a game that, outside of being a Penn State fan, the rest of the world will probably pay much attention to until USC. And that's the second week of October. So they've had time to iron a lot of the wrinkles out. And they go USC and then at Michigan back-to-back. And the rest of their schedule, guys, Purdue, Washington, Minnesota, Rutgers, Maryland. So, look, if you merely win the games you're favored to win, they are a 2-loss team in conference. They may be favored against USC, but if they just split those USC-Michigan games there and win the rest of the way, they're going to go to Indianapolis in all likelihood, at which point you got to win 4 quarters. So I'm going to put an 8 on Penn State. I bumped it down to a 6 for Michigan, but I readily admit to you, if we did nothing more than switched Michigan and Penn State schedules, the confidence ratings would switch here. So a lot of this is schedule-based. That's just the way of college football now. I put a 6 on the confidence meter that Michigan can win the Big Ten. The mystery around the offense, not to mention the mystery around a new coaching staff coming in, that has a lot to do with this. It's probably, what would you say, Jesse, a B to a B plus level roster compared to your Ohio States or your Oregons. Not a poverty roster, maybe a little bit off the pace of those top 2, but that's okay. Like Michigan has won games before being described like that. But I just think about when I bring Kyle Whittingham in and then I bring the rest of his staff in, is it a lightning caught in the bottle immediately sort of thing? Does it take a couple of years? I mean, Bryce Underwood, the quarterback there, is the first sort of glaring example in the NIL era of conversation that sounds like it does. Meaning, when you used to get a 5-star quarterback, it used to still make perfect sense to say, well, all right, 2 or 3 years down the road, that's when we may win a national title with him, unless he's an extreme outlier. But now, since you pay so much money for him, you talk about them like they're, rookies in the NFL or they're free agent acquisitions in the NFL. They're just supposed to, boom, produce immediately. Why? Because we paid him X amount of dollars. Well, now Bryce Underwood is in his 2nd year. So especially when it comes to him, they're going to talk about him like that. I don't know. I think that there is a world where if they're really good in one-possession games, if they're really good at sort of tightening the knots that were really loose there with the previous staff, there may be some easy wins. I don't mean on the field. There may be some easy wins in terms of progress, and then those manifest themselves on the field. I'm going to put them at a 6. I did the same thing with USC. I put USC at a 6 on the confidence meter to win the league as well. Now, I could say it like this. I could say, if USC is good enough to make the Big Ten title game, well, that means that they were good enough on the line of scrimmage to weather an extremely tough schedule. That means Maava came through as a 3rd-year quarterback. That means Lincoln Riley handled the pressure. That probably means this top-rated recruiting class per the On3 and Rivals recruiting rankings. That means that class probably included several immediate contributors And if they're good enough to make the conference title game, well, I'll make it a 9 or a 10 that they could win it. But that's not this game. This game starts from week 1, and it wonders, are they even good enough to navigate the schedule and get to Indianapolis? And the schedule, I don't want to just gloss over this, is like the antithesis of what Penn State plays. Because the schedule includes Oregon. It includes, obviously, a trip to Penn State. There's Washington right there in the middle of those. Ohio State's on this schedule. And if you can't see this, if you're not watching on YouTube right now, USC plays Oregon, Washington, Penn State, Wisconsin, Ohio State, at Indiana. They're all back to back to back. There is a bye, I think there are 2 bye week. So there's a bye thrown in there. Yeah, between Penn State and Wisconsin, right? Yeah. Still, though, all of those games just boom, 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 one after the other. So I'm nervous about it, but I still maintain what I've said. They got to make the playoff this year. They got to be right there in that conversation. There was nobody else in the Big Ten that I looked at as having really high confidence that they can win the league. Washington, I would put it like a 3. Jedfish, I've got faith in him. Damon Williams is still the quarterback there, not necessarily by free choice, free will, but he is still the quarterback there. Iowa is kind of always in the mix, but never able to be further than just in the mix. I put them at a 2. So that's a look sort of at the FanDuel odds right now to win the Big Ten.